Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 30 has just been released. We have the translations for this chapter, and this chapter is very interesting. Not the most action-packed, but we are still in the setup phase for this chapter. And you guys have to remember what we witnessed in the previous arc. The setup is what truly paid off the arc coming to a conclusion in such a peak way, with Sarada awakening her Mangekyo Sharingan and Boruto and Kawaki versus Juro. But for this chapter, we see that Mamushi is the cover. And honestly, I love this cover right here. This is one of the best Senju covers, but as of right now, we finally have all of the Senju covers being released, with Bug being the last one to get his. The title for this cover is Nuisance, and if I'd have to rate the cover out of 10, I'd give this a cool 8.5. I really like this cover that we're seeing. But the chapter starts off right where we left off, with a lot of people who believed that the Mamushi clones were dealt with by Chocho. That simply wasn't the case, as what we see being the case is that they easily stand back up. Although due to their intelligence, they fell for a Shikadai strategy alongside that of Himawari and Chocho, but ultimately they still weren't able to take them out, as Chocho doesn't have the attack potency necessary to be able to deal with such threats. And this is exactly what we see as they start to stand up, and immediately we have Himawari who starts to prepare her Bijou Bomb. It seems a bit like she is hesitating, and to ultimately allow Himawari to make this attack possible without damaging the village heavily, we have Shikadai who ends up showcasing another ability. And I really like what we're seeing right here. Ikimoto is displaying these abilities that Shikadai has learned over the time skip. And we can clearly see, although we may not have seen them actually train, this is what a time skip is for, to showcase a change in power after a large amount of time has been given. As we have this almost ball trap, this shadow trap that Shikadai is able to perform, which allows him to trap all of the Mamushi clones as they are multiplying in this ball. And we have Chocho who grabs this ball and throws it up into the air and allows Himawari to use her Tail Beast Bomb to destroy them. What we're seeing right here is something that I really like, due to the simple fact that we have Shikadai that's already started to include Himawari's abilities into their battle formation, as they're going to start coordinating using Himawari's great attack potency and her abilities that allow her to do a lot of damage. As unlike Chocho, she is actually capable of defeating those Mamushi clones using her Tail Beast Bomb, and this just showcases the higher level of strength that Himawari has due to the Nine Tails and the training that she has started to conduct. So I overall love this sequence that we see. We see Himawari destroying them. I love seeing the blast. A lot of people might skip this and overglance it, but this is absolutely peak. I love this that we see. And ultimately, I do want to see more of this in the future, more destruction. But since we are in the village, it's cool that we don't see much destruction around the village, as clearly we don't want the village to be destroyed. But in the future, especially when we move on to different locations, I would like to see greater destruction, more display of just how strong these characters truly are, especially now that we are in the time skip. But what we ultimately see is that Shikadai is kind of mad at Himawari due to the simple fact that she is hesitating, and Himawari is not somebody who is used to fighting, unlike Boruto, who at the same age. Himawari is even older than Boruto in part 1, but Boruto clearly would have hesitated in this moment because he has more experience. But since this is almost like a life or death battle, especially due to the fact that this is a battle for the future of the world, and we had Shikadai who had this conversation with her father, this is why Shikadai is pretty tense and he uses such language, as this entire moment his father is working with the enemy just to make sure that everybody is safe. He is risking his reputation, risking everything to protect the village. And that's why this is a very important moment. And Shikadai is quite tense with Himawari in this case because Himawari has to understand this very same principle. And now we end up going back to Inojin and Kashin Koji, where no matter what they're doing, the numbers of Mamushi clones keep on multiplying. And now we see that Shikamaru is being brought to Kobu so that he can be interrogated. We see that Mitsuki is also there in that base, and it appears like in the coming chapters we're finally going to see Mitsuki unleashed, as what we do end up seeing in this interrogation room is absolutely amazing. But we see that Kobu is made aware of what exactly is going on. Boruto is in the village, and the Senju known as Mamushi is here, a threat of a level that is unknown. But regardless of that, he still wants to discuss with Shikamaru and have Shikamaru be brought in. So that's exactly what is going to happen. But before then, we see that the Mamushi clones are running around the village, and they have surpassed 100 Mamushi clones, and we know that the optimal range of Mamushi clones to be effectively defeated is around 20 to 30, which is a high difference than 100 that they clearly are, so things are not really working out. But we have Sarada that appears. She goes to Delta to make sure that Delta is actually scouting and exactly what Delta is seeing. And for what we can see, we see a bunch of Mamushi clones that are hurtled around each other, just as Kashin Koji described would happen when Mamushi ends up creating multiple clones. Sarada is really ready to fight. We can really see that resolve, that she's ready to actually go out there and do something, but Shikamaru tells her to hold out, as he tells everybody to wait for a quick second. It is at that moment that Shikamaru basically describes what is going on. We have multiple Mamushi clones, and they have reached a level that is quite high than the intended route, but they don't have to panic, as this is still going according to his predictions. And now they're going to be moving towards a different plan. And one thing that is being described here is exactly what are Mamushi's patterns. Mamushi is not harming anybody that doesn't attack him. This is a very important point. If you do not attack Mamushi, Mamushi is simply going to ask you one simple question. You answer the question and he leaves. You don't know where Ida is, he moves on to the next person. That's his simple strategy. But if you attack Mamushi, then he will kill you. And that's why we see that the village is not heavily destroyed, as we know that he doesn't want to deal with Jura's wrath, and all he ultimately wants to do is find Ida. But as Shikamaru is preparing to give exactly what his strategy is, he is called in by Kobu. The sensory team lets him know that he has to end up leaving whatever he is doing to go be interrogated by Kobu. This is a request directly by Kobu himself, who tells Shikamaru and reminds him of his authority, and basically forces Shikamaru to end up coming. Shikamaru lets Inojin know that if he stays there for too long, he'll have to be the one to direct everybody, and that's going to be something that is incredibly important, as Shikamaru not being able to see what is going on. Either he will have to find a way to let Shikamaru know about the moves that Mamushi is doing, will be the one directing them. Boruto lets them know that he has already dealt with his sector, and what is the next move, where Shikamaru is basically telling Boruto to wait as he has to deal with something. But that causes Boruto to worry a little bit. He asks Shikamaru if everything is okay, but it is at that moment ends up being attacked by one of the shinobi of the Leaf Police Force. He is caught because he is caught off guard, and then they put him down. They attempt to restrain Boruto and grab his sword, but immediately their chakra is sucked in, just as Sumire intended for that power to be. All their power is being drained. Boruto uses that as an opportunity to flee, using the flying Raijin to teleport next to his sword and then ultimately fly up in the air, not doing damage to all of these people, but leaving them with a very important warning. If you see Mamushi, run, do not attempt to fight him, because if you attempt to fight him, you will ultimately perish. As Boruto is now flying up in the air, and we see Mamushi clones pretty much everywhere in the village, and this is ultimately going to lead to Ida being found. I really think that in the coming chapters, and probably the next 2 chapters, Mamushi will finally find where Ada is. And this is a point that is being made when we see Sarada and Delta's conversation, as their movements are not random. Their movements are quite intentful, as they are basically describing the fact that they are roaming around searching for Ida, but it seems like they are not just wandering around randomly. So the strategy that Mamushi currently has is not being explained to us in the most depth, but is clearly being pointed towards that they have a clear path that they are using, and they have clear intentions that they're ultimately going to find Ida in a way that is not random, but comes through a place of strategy. Shikamaru tells them to keep observing as he finally starts to move out and go towards Kobu's direction. getting one of Kashin Koji's toads in his pocket as he moves out. And as they're moving out, we have Shikamaru who asks Kashin Koji if he has some sort of a plan, and he says something like that. Something like that Boruto himself actually hears. This is very important. But it is after that we have Kashin Koji who tells Inojin to stop the transmission for a while, which means that nobody is going to be able to hear anything that is taking place. The only thing that's going to be audible is the words between Inojin and Kashin Koji and the toad that Kashin Koji has and Shikamaru. That's all that is going to be heard, and nothing is actually going to be recorded. This is a very important point, as what Kashin Koji wants Inojin to do is use a completely different jutsu. Shikamaru makes his way into the interrogation room where Kobu is there, and Kobu, it seems like he has a pretty good hunch. He knows what is going on. He knows that Shikamaru is pretty much working with the traitor known as Boruto, and he in a way wants Shikamaru to confess to it himself, but also wants to gather up evidence for that being the case, where Shikamaru is not budging on that at the moment, only listening. But it is at that moment that we see the toad that was implanted on Shikamaru's shoulder, and we see Inojin who used the mind transferring jutsu to end up controlling Kobu's body. After he does so, he immediately is in control of Lord Kobu's body. But he ends up making a massive blunder. When looking at his father, he says dad, he says papa, and that gives it away almost to Shikamaru, but then he immediately tries to rectify the wrongs, as he probably hasn't used this jutsu too much. He hasn't mastered it on a different level, as he feels quite weird. However, he is still in control of Kobu's body. It is at that moment that we see one of Kashin Koji's toads go on his shoulder. He ends up going on his shoulder, and then we have Kashin Koji who tells Inojin, who is in control of Lord Kobu's body, to leave the premises. Then does exactly as Kashin Koji told him and says that he's going to need a break and he's going to go to the rooftop, which is clearly something that Sai notices as weird, especially due to the fact that Kobu just called him papa, which is something that would never happen in a normal situation. So he is telling the guards that he wants nobody to come with him, and he leaves to go to the rooftop. As he is on the rooftop, Kashin Koji that whispers something in his ear. It is something so weird that he thinks that Kashin Koji is joking, but Kashin Koji repeats it. He says, "End Kobu's life." And Inojin is completely caught off guard. And we have Sai. We go back to the room. Sai clearly knows what is going on and is worried about what exactly we have Shikamaru who is making his son Inojin do. And now we go back to Kobu, where we have Kashin Koji that tells Inojin to jump off the building so that he can have the Mamushi clones attack him. And Inojin is clearly caught off guard. He thinks that Kashin Koji is joking, but Kashin Koji is absolutely serious. He tells him to listen. There is no time for questioning the morality of the situation. Think about it rationally. It can't be helped. Kobu is fully our enemy. And since we have a Inojin that is saying, "This is insane, have you gone mad?" Clearly not going with the plan that Kashin Koji has, Kashin Koji starts to take things in his own hands. As we have Mamushi that appears at the worst time. Do you know where I can find a woman named Ida? And without Inojin even being able to do anything, we have Kashin Koji using the toad who ends up launching an attack at Mamushi. And because of that, Mamushi gets angry, starts to multiply, doesn't really even think, and he says, "The hell are you trying to do? Do you want to die?" And we clearly see that Kobu is about to get Marcoed. And the reason why this reminds me so much of a Marco situation in Attack on Titan, where he ultimately ended up being put in a situation where he just has to die. He got caught off guard, found too much information, and now it is time for him to die. And that's basically what's going to happen to Kobu. But in this case, Inojin is the one who is actually controlling Kobu. There is so much to discuss. However, there is a big plot point about what is going to happen next, and I really think it's predicting it, is that Boruto is not going to let this happen. At first I was like, okay, Boruto is not going to save him, but a big blunder from Kashin Koji's side, especially since he doesn't want Boruto to figure out, but he does end up alluding to what is going to take place. As in this panel, we end up seeing Kashin Koji and Shikamaru's final words. And their final words end up revealing too much information that make it quite easy for Boruto to figure out what is going on. We have Shikamaru who says, "Do you have a plan?" And Kashin Koji says, "Well." And then we have something being made clear by Ikimoto in the transferring jutsu that we have Inojin use, where we have Kashin Koji who says it's something like that. And then we have Kashin Koji who tells Inojin to stop the transmission for a moment. All of this happening at once lets Boruto know that something devious is really about to go down. And with the fact that we have Boruto in the air, it's just a perfect moment for Boruto to potentially be this guy that saves Kobu. But what are the ramifications of Boruto potentially saving Kobu? We'll have to be discussing that in a video to come. But this chapter, the more I read it, the more I enjoy it. Obviously, I am a bit disappointed that we don't really see too much going on, too much action, too much groundbreaking reveals, but I really feel like this subplot that is currently being explored will have a big payoff, and especially to the future of the Leaf. I'm telling you guys, Ikimoto is cooking something here, and I am absolutely ready to see what it ends up being, because this setup is going to be something we're gonna come back to and realize how much this moment changed so much for the Leaf Village. And we're going to be breaking down all of it this month, and you guys definitely let me know your thoughts, comments, and concerns when it comes to this chapter. My personal rating, I'd rate this chapter a 7 out of 10. A good chapter, but not something too groundbreaking. A good setup chapter that Ikimoto has given us. Let me know your own personal rating. It's been your boy Dynasty, and I'm out, bruh.